Hello friends, and welcome to the channel. I'm Handington, and today we're going to be looking at another set of Paragon Lolo's characters that she had designed. Let's check out the little tweet over here. Time for the ultimate test. Which out of the main 6 robots of Ironos are your favorites and why? So there's Tombsteel, Alumina, Irogun, Neonix, Silverlance, and Mercerous. I want to do what we did with the Angry Birds characters, just the design and what they all say about the character, because she's really, really good at character design. Don't quote me on this. I'm bad at with names. But just going by the names themselves, it has a really cool theming. These are also all her original characters. These are not based off of other characters like the Angry Birds. There we are. So over here we have Tombsteel. Look at this. Look at all the detail. My phone isn't even strong enough to load all this detail. In a way, I think I probably should have been looking at this on a better platform, but it was just easier on my phone. Yeah, it looks much sharper on a thing that is not my cell phone recording this. So please take that with a grain of salt, that her artwork looks significantly better in the actual tweet, which I will link to in the description below. Go check her out. And while you're there, looking at the description, seeing what kind of weird thing that I wrote, because I always do that, don't forget to give a like and subscribe. I try not to say that a whole bunch, but yeah, apparently it actually works when you say that, because people don't do that for whatever reason. So one of my few plugs. There you go. And don't forget to like and subscribe to her channel too. She also has a channel where she does other things. So the Tombsteel, look at this. I love how the spike isn't exactly like a normal curved spike. It looks more like a razor blade with an extra sharp edge. And again, when making characters, certain shapes denote certain feelings. So like scary and intimidating has triangles, sturdy has squares, and softer, more welcoming has more rounded edges. That's generally what those 3 basic shapes tend to give off in terms of vibes and feelings. So Tombstone is supposed to be very intimidating. That's why Tombsteel's design is just full of triangles. All of the little parts of the cape here end in a triangle-ish shape when they curve like that. The hood, the spike, even the shape of the eyes on the sides become angular. The razors on the edge, all of the hands, and the way that they turn into more sharp edges. The little like rib cage metal that looks like more triangular spikes. Even the way that the cape rips, even if it's rounded on the inside, it's still mostly triangular. As you can see here, these little parts become a little bit more pointed, and there's not too many rips. There's just enough rips so that it's not too distracting, but enough for you to be like, oh yeah, look at all of these rips. Look at all this. There's a very good balance of the character feeling like they have a cape, and also that is just worn and not they're wearing a few strings that are still together. And of course the little feet are triangular shaped as well, even though they end in a flat point over there. You can see they're triangles as well. So everything about him is supposed to feel very intimidating. So he's either a villain or he's like an anti-hero. And what seems more like he'd be an anti-hero is that on he has a little skull and a tiny little heart. And I think the heart is part of like his power core, or however that works. I don't know exactly how Transformers work, but that little extra heart in the middle might change him from going, oh, he's a bad guy too. Either he'd be somebody who would reform from being bad, or he's just kind of like a goth loner, and he actually still has a nice side, and he has to literally wear his heart on his sleeve. And he as much as he would probably want to try and be extra dark, he still has that little extra like bit of goodness in there that you can see both on the outside and in how he would probably act, where he would end up being probably a little bit more cold and callous, but still care on the inside. So that's really cool. And of course, there's the little what do you call it? The little glowing spots here. They almost look kind of like stitches in a way, or kind of like fish bones ish. I like to imagine they're stitches, so this way, similar to how his cape is in tatters, the energy flowing out of him is sort of just kind of like stitched together, like he's just kind of hanging in there. He's doing his best to try to hang on, and it's just a really cool cape. I like how the cape is also beat up and worn from different battles. It shows that he's been experienced. He's fought a whole bunch. He's not squeaky clean, pristine, nor does he care too much about making sure like everything is in tip-top condition. Like this knight character over here, both of these more knight related characters, you could tell that they'd want to like polish their armor essentially, and upkeep themselves. Whereas he likes what he likes, and he enjoys the dark cape that he has, and he's not going to be abandoning this cape anytime soon, even if it gets torn. And the pants, I think he's also wearing on top, which also shows part of his like loyalty. He's not going to just throw something away when it's not useful to him, and I like that. And you can also see the little skull broken-y parts underneath, which both looks like the skull, but I think it's made out of metal, so it could also be paint. It looks good. It works very well. So I think that's really cool. He's just a very well-designed character. And then over here we have Goldilocks. What was your name? Illumina. You're Illumina. Unless you're you're the silver, because you're silver. You're Illumina, even though you're gold. Oh, I guess. Oh, named after aluminum, but supposed to illuminate because fire. Yes, that's it. It has a double meaning. It's a metal that also feels like it would be able to light up. So she seems like she's a sort of no nonsense kind of a tough character. Again, another character who also has a heart on, like, pretty prominent on the outside, because you can see with some of the others, you don't immediately notice the heart. Even when you see the heart here, and we'll get to this character, the heart is green colored, unlike the others, which were red, which almost seems like it's not necessarily tainted, because this character seems a bit more like a bit of a trickster of sorts, or the niceness is still there. For a lot of these characters, which seem like they'd be a bit more dark and a bit less, what do you call it? Like, oh, these characters might not necessarily be good. You can see that they still have like some good in them. So there's still a heart, even if this character's heart seems a bit more like it's trickstery. Much like how the armor isn't really revealing the heart as easily. The heart kind of blends in. You can see the heart on his hand, who seems very open and optimistic. But also, wearing the armor could be like, oh, would probably take on a lot of extra leadery things and a lot of extra pressure, and would probably keep that all inside, which kind of looks like the energy on the inside just kind of barely maintaining inside the outfit. My gosh, a lot of characters wearing their hearts on their sleeves. I don't even know if the analogy works anymore, but still. The characters work for their energy as well, and the energy that they give off kind of seems to match both their color scheme and part of their character. So he seems like a very calming, like relaxing sort of presence. But again, we're moving on. We're moving on a little bit too far. Both of them have their warmer colored hearts. Interestingly enough, Tombsteel has a red heart instead of a green heart, despite giving off that energy. A pink heart. Pinkish red. Fuchsia? Yeah, sort of a fuchsia heart. And then Illumina gives off the red heart, which matches the red energy and stuff like that. I feel like the more prominent their heart is, the more it's important to remember that, oh yeah, this character has some good in them. Whereas this character, it's like, oh yeah, he automatically seems to give off good, which is why the heart is a little less noticeable. It's just kind of tucked away onto the glove, which is it seems like an oxymoron because you'd think that you'd notice it the most while being on the hand. But considering the rest of the character, it doesn't stand out as much as the rest of the characters would. Like, the glowing on here, you see the little heart on the side, so it's still pretty noticeable, but it's matched with the little... looks almost like an unknown from Pokemon. Energy design on the inside over here. So this character, similar to how this character has a green heart, this one seems a little bit more like mysterious and or just kind of keeps to themselves and stuff like that. Less of a team player and stuff like that. So you have to remember, oh yeah, still cares, still has the heart, but you could also mistake the heart when looking very quick before noticing it for being in the middle. So you look over and it's just like, oh wait, where's the heart? Oh, there it is. It's still not very far, but the character seems to be kind of like listless and not care, so it almost feels like the heart was ripped out, but is still right nearby. So it's really cool. I like that. Similar to the heart kind of blending in, the heart is on the Huzmawatsis, the helmet, which you could also mistake for this little section over here, feeling almost like the heart would be ripped out. Another very hardened character. Seems to be like a nice guy. He has a smile. Definitely the kind of guy where if somebody gets hurt, he would immediately charge into battle to try and defend them. His whole lights are set up to feel sort of like a general. He's very big and bulky. He gives off a much more square kind of vibe. So even though there are things end in points, the general, like, rectangularness of all these little lumpies on the side, they also give off a sort of like block sort of shape. Although his helmet gives off a bunch of points. So, like, he's tough and intimidating, but he's still pretty nice. But again, the heart isn't as immediately noticeable because of all the extra glowing that's around that kind of draws away from it. It's a bit more of one of the subtle hearts. So it feels like he'd be the kind of person where there would end up being some sort of, like, he'd generally stop conflicts, but if something important happens to him, then he'll kind of start to go off and be upset. So whereas he would have a generally nice personality, if something ends up happening, then he'll switch over to being more ruthless. That's sort of what that's conveying to me. And this character, she seems like she'd probably, because she's also a knight, she'd probably be, like, oh no, we should be doing this, compared to the other leader, knight kind of character. So I feel like she would end up being kind of like against some of the plans for the group or whatever, and would just kind of be like, no, we should be doing this. But she would also still have valid points. And I feel like they'd end up clashing together and then have to learn to work together or something like that. Kind of stoic and a bit more cold despite having fire, but there would still be a warm side to her when you'd end up talking, like, if somebody really needed her. So, like, you could still depend on her and stuff like that. But she'd have her own ideas, and she'd kind of be like, no, we should kind of do this kind of thing. Yeah, like, I'm just thinking of plot stuff. But she seems like another character. I feel like her and him would probably get along pretty well. And they'd probably end up having, like, debates or discussions and stuff like that. Again, this character, very, like, he has the smile to him, but he also has an injury on his medal. So it's like, oh, he, despite being super big and bulky and almost pristine, he also has a couple of battle scars. You can also see the scar on there and over here. So it's like he's not invulnerable. He still has cracks in his armor, despite the fact that he's super strong, and you wouldn't necessarily expect that. Unlike the other characters here, who I think she's a little bit worn down. I don't know if that's supposed to be a shine. So he's not as tattered as Tombsteel, but definitely not as pristine as some of the other characters here. Speaking of which, over here we have the Onyx character. So this character feels a bit more like a trickster. Seems to give off a very fast sort of feeling, where it's like this character would rush into things, be kind of confident and cocky, probably be a little snarky to other characters. The character is just full of triangles, lots and lots and lots of triangles. Everything pretty much ends in some kind of triangle, even almost more than Tombsteel. However, another important part of the character is the circles on the sides. So the way that those little tube wires become circles, the wings also have little circular indents, and there are other circular wires over here that also can, as well as the circles here, and the little, like, almost wheel sort of heels for the shoes. It also conveys the fact that even though this character feels very extra, like, combative and intimidating and would kind of get in your face, there's still a nice side to the character. So, like, this character would probably, if they were sitting at a table, this character would probably put, like, a rubber spider in the bowl of cereal. The cereal, because they're robots, would just be a bunch of, like, nuts and bolts that they also pour milk into, because you can't have it without the milk. The milk is very important. So they have that. And this person would put a rubber spider in there and then would probably laugh. And then when the villain comes by, they'll be like, "Hey, you're pretty blue for a goo," and then start to go into the battle. They wouldn't say that, but that was the only thing that I could come up with at the moment. Improv, yay! My skills have failed me. But like, the character would rush into battle, would probably get smacked away, would probably want their own strategies as well. To be like, no, what if we just rush in? It's like, no, we have to hold back. It's like, but we have to do something. So it's sort of like that sort of dynamic, I think. And this character would end up rushing in, getting hit. These characters wouldn't work together until they eventually learn to work together. And then one of these characters would get hurt. I'd like to imagine maybe this character who'd be holding their own would end up getting hit, and this character would end up going like, no, and then start to work with the team a little bit better, and then they would end up working together. Something like that. And meanwhile, while they're figuring out who would be battling, Tombsteel is doing, like, reconnaissance off to the side, and this guy would be holding his own against whatever bad guy they'd be doing. And that's sort of like the dynamic that they would end up having. And, like, this character would end up being whoop, zoom in, oh, there we go. This character would end up being kind of strong, so would also probably end up wanting to hold back, but after this character doesn't, like, after this character gets hurt, both characters in the end would probably care a bit about each other. So that would end up causing this character to start to fight, and then when that character gets knocked out, then, like I said before, the working together and whatnot. And then near the end, that's when Tombsteel comes in and is just like, hey, I found an extra weakness for the guy. And then would end up, they'd all end up working together to take on the enemy as a team. And then I imagine Tombsteel would end up covering, having his moment in the battle to start being cool because he has a whole bunch of extra spikes and whatnot, and he'd start beating the bad guy up, probably after this guy ends up getting knocked down, and then Tombsteel would come in right near the end once they start to learn to work together. Tombsteel would come in out of nowhere when, like, the bad guy would start walking up to them, and it's just like, so now I'm gonna get you, like, for this character being knocked down, and then he comes by, defends them, and says the weakness, and they all work together. And that's how that would end up going. That's what I would imagine their dynamic would be. If you wanted to have a battle to show off their dynamics early on, I imagine it would be something kind of like that. So I think that would be pretty cool. So what else was I going to? I already talked a little bit more about him, but it feels like he's mostly nice, but could probably crack under the pressure and would want everybody to try and, like, be careful. He seems like a very protecting sort of guy. He also has a lot of more rigid square shapes. So even though there are triangles to him, it gives off a much more blocky feel. So he doesn't necessarily feel as sharp and intimidating. He feels much more friendly and sturdy and reliable and stuff like that. But again, you can see on his gauntlets, they do end at a point, so he does have some sharpness to him, and the glow of his shoe or his boots also give off, same with this little section here, and the roundedness of his eyes. He gives off a bit more of a softer presence, while still being able to have like some strength and can be intimidating. But he's mostly just kind of sturdy and reliable and stuff like that. So it's really cool. I like this, and he's just a very cool looking knight. Seems very mysterious. Seems to have more like energy related powers, I'd imagine. Kind of would stay off to the side, but still kind of care about the characters, which is kind of be like the Raven of the group. Somewhat more of a downer, somewhat more pessimistic out of the team, but would do their best. Would probably end up being like, like, while you were bickering, the rest of them were getting away, or something like that. Would probably be the most wanting to do their own thing, not because they want to be combative, but just because they just kind of want to be alone. I imagine this character would also probably get along well with Tombsteel, and when they're talking, this trickster character probably wouldn't get along as well with Tombsteel, who would be fed up with the nonsense and stuff like that. This character being very mellow is on board with that, and this character would end up wanting to make sure that this character was okay and stuff happening and whatnot. So I feel like that would work out pretty well, where they'd have a bit of an interesting dynamic. Each of the characters would then have not necessarily a foil, but somebody to work off of. So like this guy would probably end up being like the front line, first guy to go in, whereas Tombsteel would hold back and strategize a bit more. This character would probably have an alternate or similar leadership role with this one. So that they'd either work together and strategize on a plan to figure something out, or they'd be at odds, and it all depends on the day. And then this character being very, very much in your face and very extroverted. That's it. This character would be extroverted, which would kind of play pretty well with this more introverted character. So I feel like that would work out pretty well. And the bulkier tanks would also have a separate dynamic. Like they'd ask this guy for help, and he'd say, "But we have to do a thing," and then he might also be enough of he would end up either going along with their plans, or he would be what reminds them to stick together or something like that. If one or two of them ends up going off, or he would be the one that either of them would confide in, and then these characters, all of the more darkened, smaller characters would end up confiding in themselves. So that would end up being like their own sort of social group. Which would end up making for interesting different dynamics when you pair up the characters that wouldn't normally be paired up. So like having both of them together, that could end up being an interesting sort of situation where it's like she would end up leading, but he'd want to do his own thing, and they'd end up coming to terms that they both have very valid ways of going about things, and they both need to remember that their strategies would end up working well together, but she would end up like respecting that, or she'd be annoyed because it would be like, "Oh, you're doing something different. You're just like him," and then he would just be like, "Oh," and then kind of disappear, and then he would end up doing something that would end up making her go, "Oh, I see. You do have validity to your strategy," and then he would end up having some sort of idea that might not work out, or could be supplemented by her idea or something like that. So then they end up working together. And I'd love to see like these two characters working together, because this character is much more bulky, and then this character would start to run into battle and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, that could lead to a different dynamic where they don't necessarily have the most strategy besides just be strong and then be fast. Be slow and sturdy, but be fast and easier to take out. And then they'd have to try and figure out a strategy without the leaders. Like if both of the leaders were lost and they're like, oh, what do we do? Usually when we'd get into a situation, the others would be able to be here because we're very good at what we do, but that's all that we do. We're very specialized. Like he's the muscle, but he's not as dexterous. He's not as much like he holds his own, and he's able to move big stuff. But the others would end up having more crafty plans in terms of fighting. Like his technique is just to kind of like punch and stand there as opposed to like strategizing more. Whereas so that would counter pretty well with this character running in pretty quickly. So this guy would hold out while this character would end up finding the weakness in that regard and have to use their smarts that way. And then again, this character, probably this one would want to help but not understand the purple character as well as this character does, the Onyx one. But end up wanting to help, and then this character would be like, no, I don't want your help, or whatever. And then this character would be like, oh, I would feel bad that I can't help. But then this character would realize that, oh, this character is just trying to help. And would appreciate it. But then this character would learn that, like, not every way of helping would end up being what everybody needs, and then this character is totally fine for doing things their own way. Like, wouldn't necessarily have to open up or change. But then this character would also be like, oh yeah, no, there's still validity to other things, but I'd let you guys do that. That's why we work well as a team. Something like that. And of course you'll have maybe this guy, the Tombsteel, and Mr. McKnight. I wonder what kind of dynamic they would end up having, where it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna lead you, and then he's like, no, I'm gonna do a different thing. But like you could have that be a difference in their personality. Like he would, like, right after he would learn that this character is okay, and also after these two would have like their adventure together where they work together, this guy would end up learning his lesson and accept that, like, oh no, you're gonna be different, so I'm gonna reel back. And then it would be kind of like subversive in that way, where after you'd get through all the normal tropes, then he'd be like, oh okay, as a leader I have to recognize the strength of my team. All right, back again. It's just giving me some problems, so we should probably wrap this up. But then Tombsteel would be he would recognize, okay, your strategies matter, and that's still important. And then he would let Tombsteel do his own thing. Tombsteel would appreciate that, and then Tombsteel would do his own thing. But that would be when Tombsteel ends up not being able to pull through on his plan, and then he realizes, oh no, wait a minute, I can't do everything by myself. You could have like a very charming scene where it's just like, oh yeah, I believe in you. You do your own thing. And he's just like, thank you, finally somebody who gets it. And then he would end up doing his own thing, but then he won't be able to manage completely on his own, and he's just like, oh, I remember my lesson from what we had done before, and I work best when I do my own thing, but I eventually come back to the group, and it's very important that I do that too. And not completely be alone. And then that, like, he would end up being in a bit of a pickle, and then this guy would end up coming in and just being like, hey, you need some help? And it's just like, yep. And it would be like, thank you very much, and then here's what I learned. And he'd be like, oh, cool, I didn't know that. And then they'd end up being able to either, yeah, both of them would probably be able to either hold out on their own or escape some sort of situation, because I don't think they'd be just strong enough to fight through a basic thing. They'd need the rest of the team to come in, and you could probably have some sort of like really cool moment where the rest of them come in and help finish up a fight after what they learn or something like that, or they would end up rescuing the rest of the team or something like that. I don't know. There's a lot you can do with these characters. They seem like a lot of fun. So I like it. You can tell a whole lot. They're all very distinct, even though a lot of them feel kind of similar. At least at first glance, where it's like, oh, three kind of almost more sharp-looking, brooding characters. Oh yeah, I forgot. This character is full of a whole combination of them. But the shoulders are rounded. The eyes, even though they're pointed on the side, the roundness of the eyes combined with the roundness of the mouth feels much more like the character is supposed to be a rounded shape. Even down to the metal not having as sharp of an edge. So this character would end up being a bit more like empathetic in general. So like this character would probably end up seeing like the birds or the flowers or something, and kind of like leaning down to them and making sure that they'd be okay, or caring about other people first, and stuff like that. So and bleh, still can't speak. Even the way that the little nubbies everywhere around here are shaped, they're all so much more rounded than the other characters to give off a much more softer, gentler presence. But it's still matched with a few more like points. So there's still a couple of spikes, especially either lower down, and the general shape of the character is like a big triangle. So like this character still is mysterious and can fight back. Isn't necessarily as sturdy as some of the others, but is able to fight. So it's like generally soft, but is able to hold their own, and it's really cool. I like this. They all feel different. The only characters that I would say are probably a bit more similar would be the silver guy and her, because they both feel a bit more like knights. But again, they'd have like different personalities, where he'd end up being a bit more chipper, maybe a bit more naive to things, probably a bit more trusting, whereas she'd be a little bit more cold, but they'd end up needing each other to end up being like foils. So it would make sense that they would be similar, and they also have the silver and gold sort of thing going with them. So they're similar but opposites, but not too different from each other. So it works out. It works out pretty well. You can tell quite a lot from the way that the characters are all just designed and everything like that. She is really, really good at this. Not to mention she's just a really great artist in general. She makes really good stuff. So this is the video. I hope you enjoyed it, Lolo. I hope this was a lot of fun. I think I mentioned it before, but Lolo had actually requested that I do this video. Lolo requested that I go over the designs, and I said, hey, what if I make a video on it? And in this way, I can also share this kind of stuff with you all. And this way you all can get ideas for your characters and other things like that. Yeah, those are all of my thoughts on the subject. Thank you for listening to them, and I hope this was fun. I hope this was pretty cool. So thank you, friends, but I believe it's that time again. If you like what I do, don't be shy to give a thumbs up. Have a pleasant day, everyone, and this is Handington signing off. Bye! Don't forget to check out the Paragon Lolo on Twitter. Go low!